Good evening, folks. Triple Crown here, coming to you from Vancouver, British Columbia. Continuation of the Global War 1939 series. This episode, we are really going to get into it. The topic is Germany's first turn, so G1, and how the double impulse. We're going to go over the full G1. Now, this is something that was in the original 1939. And when Kurt showed me for the first time, I recall remember playing the original G40 and BBR and being blown away at the complexity in comparison to, say, Anniversary or the original. And when I saw this, it was the next level up. It was going from almost like a two-dimensional game to a three-dimensional game. Now, that was just my impression of it, but I was just amazed at the double impulse. Now, what the double impulse was supposed to replicate or represent was the fact that the Germans caught the Western Europeans, the Poles, and everybody else, including the French, by surprise. So basically, they attacked and they took full advantage of the element of surprise, but also new technology. And that technology was how they conducted their combat with their sort of fast-moving mechanized units supported by the Luftwaffe and the Stuka dive bombers. So there's been a few changes to this game, so we're going to get into those as well. But the mechanics of the original double impulse is the same. So now you're talking about a double impulse. Why it's so fascinating is because you really have to project ahead. You have to project ahead your first attack, all your non-combat movements, then when all your purchases come on the board, and then your second attack and non-combat movements, because you're not going to have that placement at the end. So you really want to set yourself up. So you're going to have a follow-up at whatever you're doing, and whatever you're doing is striving towards your objective, but you're not going to leave yourself open. And typically, in my experience, in these games, Global 40 or BBR, that on the first round, when you're going after Paris, typically, there's going to be a couple battles that don't go your way. The dice are going to get cold. So you got to hope for the best. Now, one of the biggest differences in this game versus the original 1939 is that we didn't want the Americans sitting on the sidelines, for eight rounds before they were in the game. Because that's almost a full day, folks. And I can tell you, as the American, I've done it before, it's really tough to play when you're sitting there on the sidelines. And Japan had 7 rounds to set up their sneak attack. And by the time America's in the war, the game's pretty well over and you've spent a whole day not doing a lot. So some of the changes that we've made, we think we've sped up the game by a round or two. And that's going to, because we've reduced the Japan sneak attack, they have to use it by turn 5. So that's going to bring America into the war a little bit earlier. And if you recall, we went over the Russians. They now have armored trains, so they're also able to mobilize their units in Novosibirsk, to either go east or west and get them into the game earlier. But also, if America's in the war earlier and they decide to go Atlantic, Germany needs to be able to meet their objectives a turn or two earlier. So with that in mind, we wanted for Germany to sort of speed things up, so to speak, to be able to, and we're going to go over the reasons why, but first we're going to talk about some of the setup changes. Now, we've added a infantry to Narvik, okay? So why like that can be a real pain in the neck for the Germans. Now, why can that be a pain in the neck was because they only have one transport to start the game, and they've got one para. And there's only one guy here with a fortification, but if they get 3 hits, which they could do, there's going to be nobody left to take Narvik, okay? And so why that's important, or it could be, is because, does Germany want to be spending resources to go fight in Norway when they need to be going east towards Russia and also defending the Atlantic? So that's kind of a scenario where the Germans have to, get lucky on the dice. And there's also a national objective involved there. A couple of the other setup changes. There is now, I don't know if you can see them. There is now veteran. I don't know if I've talked about this yet. This is a new addition. There's veteran German fighters. So it only made sense. Most of the aces, or the highest kill ratio of pilots in the Second World War, was actually the Germans. So they actually had the best trained pilots, despite also the Japanese having good pilots, the Germans. So anyways, I've painted, these are Focke-Wulf 190s. So the same as the Japanese, they will attack and defend at 7. I don't have decals for them yet put on, but so they now have veteran fighters, and so they cannot be replaced. It did make sense for them to have the Bf 109 as a veteran fighter, but that's a common sculpt, and I needed to differentiate, so I elected to make them the Focke-Wulf 190. Now, what did we do for the Allies to offset that? Well, it only made sense. The British had the Spitfire, okay? So they have the Spitfire now. The Spitfire actually attacks at a 6 and defends at a 7. So this is kind of, I like this because it represents, the Battle of Britain, where they are going to be more of a defensive role, so or in a defensive position. So there's 2 Spitfires now, or Supermarine Spitfires to start the game. There's also a, is it called a, the Fairey Swordfish. Now they cannot scramble, so I don't have them on the board. I only have UK units on the board that were there to set up the game. I do now have some British units in France. There wasn't one in the original setup. I just substituted a couple of the French units for British units. Now, that was one of the flaws, I think, in 39 with speeding up how Germany's attacking Poland the same time as it attacking France, is Britain does not have the opportunity to get a couple of units over to France and vice versa. There's no French units in England. So anyways, I substituted a couple of it. I know historically early in 1939 those British units were not there. However, this was the as of now, this is the best that I can come up with. Okay, I think that's in terms of set. Oh yes, another setup change here. So there used to be a British destroyer in Sea Zone 15. Well, some people like to bend the rules, and they would, on their first German turn, go from Sea Zone 18, I think, to 17, to 7 in here, and hit this British fleet without actually declaring war on Norway. They can go through. So we wanted to stop that from happening on the first impulse. So instead of this destroyer being here, we moved it over here. They don't have the scramble, but we felt that we wanted that UK fleet to survive. Now, also what is interesting is that on the first impulse, when this is taken, unless Germany decides to attack this navy, you roll for these ships. And I've seen games where all of these ships will end up going British, and now that's a massive fleet to contend with. So just to be wary, that sometimes does happen. Sometimes it works out in the German favor, but in my experience, sometimes things go south. Now there's some pocket submarines on the German side. I think they're called Type 2 submarines to start the game. You can only have a maximum of 5 to start. They have 4. They've got 2 off of, is it Stettin? and they've got 2 here, and they've got submarines all over the place. So they've got quite a big naval presence of subs in the Atlantic to start the game. Now there is a British and German submarine to start the game and sharing Sea Zone 24. So this, if they're going to declare war on the British, this submarine, just FYI, has to leave. And something else that was in the original that I think was actually something Gargantua implemented was the Graf Spee is down here off of Argentina, Sea Zone 55, ready to cause trouble for the British in the, it's not the South Atlantic, but off of the coast of South America and West Africa. So he's ready, they're ready to do trouble. Now let's get into the Axis miners. Okay, what are the Axis miners? Well, first, the Axis miners are Finland, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria. Now, these countries, they're basically frozen until certain things happen. And just to say that off the bat, Germany is allowed to annex 2 in one turn. So they can drive through Hungary and they can drive all the way to Romania and annex both. But just because they're annexed, that does not mean the next turn those units in those 2 territories can then attack Yugoslavia. No attacks from Hungary or Romania can go into Yugoslavia until Yugoslavia is under German or Italian control. So that is up to the Germans not to take Yugoslavia. And the same goes here for Hungary. The next turn, or the second impulse, the Germans take Hungary. So they're going to annex all this, the first turn. So all these are going to be, under German control. But the units from Bulgaria are frozen, and no attacks can come from Bulgaria until Greece has fallen. So that is up to the Germans or the Italians to do. And if you just say, let the Italians handle it, well, the Italians are pretty weak to start the game, and they are going to have at least 2 or 3 turns struggle to take these 2 territories by themselves. They're definitely going to need German help. And Yugoslavia is pretty beefy. They've got a destroyer in Sea Zone 40. They've got a fighter, 5 infantry, and we've added a AAA as well. It just kind of made sense. They would have one. The Greeks have a little bit of a fleet down here, so sometimes the British like to come annex this on turn 1 to try and activate these ships here and be a menace for the Italians. But also, the first turn, Italy is a neutral. They are not at war with anybody. In fact, even when UK goes, they're not at war. So they cannot be attacked by anybody on turn 1. But also that means that no German units can end their movement in Italian territory on turn 1. And also, let's go up here and let's talk about London. So London cannot be attacked on turn or until Paris is under German or Italian control. So we didn't want to get in a scenario, somebody pointed this out in previous games, that somebody on turn 1 would just build a bunch of transports, say forget Paris, forget Poland, and they would go do a sea lion. And that was pretty tough for the UK to stop, and historically it was not accurate, so we just made a rule that until Paris is under Axis control, the Germans cannot attack basically attack the UK mainland. Okay. Now let's talk about Finland. Some interesting things going on in Finland. So there was a proxy war that happened in Finland where the Russians were fighting the Finns, but also the Germans were there as well. So basically, Germany and Russia were fighting in Finnish territory without declaring war on each other. So that historically was in the original. It's correct, but it was also in the original. So we've kept that in. So what does that mean? That means when Germany annexes Helsinki, which is the capital of Finland, there's 3 territories, they have the choice. They can make all of Finland theirs by annexing all 3 territories at once by going into Helsinki, or they can just annex Helsinki. But as soon as there's a German unit present in Helsinki, that means the Russians can attack. So Do the Germans want to do this on turn 1? Well, there's pros and there's cons, folks, to either side. Do the Germans want to waste resources? It's expensive. They're going to have to buy transports, get units over there, and it's a lot easier for the Russians to get there because they're already there via ground. So that is almost every game is a little bit different. I mean, you definitely are going to want to annex Finland, and just so you know, in the original Axis and Allies, when these territories are under German control, all of the Axis miners, Germany gets money for them, but they also get free units. And Germany can also build a major complex in Romania on turn 2. So they're going to want to get a complex there, and they're going to want to start pumping out units. Now let's talk about Poland. And that's a lot, folks. So Poland is divided into 3 territories. Now historically, Germany and Russia both attacked Poland. So historically that, again, in this game, in the original, can also happen. But I've seen it where we've had another rule fix where somebody would go in, and you can do it because you've got German units here, and just capture Warsaw and leave these 6 Polish units basically frozen, and these 4 guys here. And so we wanted to fix that. We wanted because historically that would never happen. So if Germany goes in and just captures Warsaw, all of the other Polish units are now activated, and they would go on the next UK turn, and they would fight the Germans or whoever they want to fight. Now, also with history, if Germany attacks Baltic states, Eastern Poland, that brings Russia into the war. And you've also added another little wrinkle because Germany, if they want to get units into the Med or naval units, they could build them here, in the sea zone here. And if this port was open, which is closed, they could get through. So if they attack Turkey or declare war on Turkey, that also brings Russia into the war. So that was another fix, which historically would have happened because this area here, this waterway was very important to the Russians, and even I think the Russians and the Germans were even, before the war started, something was happening with Greece. They both wanted control of Greece. So historically, there was a lot happening. Just going over my notes, folks. Gone over that. Now, so before you go, and I would not recommend you let a new player the first time play Germany. There's a lot happening. I would probably say when you're teaching somebody new, you definitely do not want them playing Germany because they're going to make mistakes, not because they're not a great player, just because they do not know the rules. So, and we're not going to worry about tech right now. So we're only going to, when you're making your first purchase, that is also the time you purchase technology. We're not going to worry about that right now. So how does the double impulse work? Well, basically, it's pretty simple. You buy technology, purchase new units. Second phase is you declare your battles, then all your non-combat movements, or you do your battles, non-combat movements, then you place your new units in the middle of your turn, and then you attack again, and then you non-com again, and then you collect your income. And when I say battles, I also mean naval units. So these guys all get to attack and move twice. Every German piece on the board can attack and move twice, so it can be pretty deadly. Now, I'm just going to go over some stuff that helps me because this is quite complex. So what are some of the tools you need to do this? Well, we're going to go over here where this is it's where I put all my new units. I can't remember what this is called. So I'm referring to this guy here, Bill Plate, I think it's called. So got those from HBG, love them. Those are some clay chips. That's going to be the first German purchase we're going to go over. Some roundels. Now when I declare a battle, I flip the roundel over and I mark all the territories. So you're going to want to do that. Sometimes I will use these, which are little arrows. You can get, everyone's got their own, seems to be version of arrows. These are combat and non-combat arrows. Come in very handy. You're going to want to have a whole bunch of multicolored D12, somewhere to roll them. And then also I use this is my my dead pile. Just, when I'm in gameplay, this is where I throw all my stuff to kind of keep the board clear, because sometimes there's a lot happening, folks. This is actually an authentic Luftwaffe, and I could call it a dish or a serving tray. So that's thought that was pretty cool. So first, what you want to do when you're starting your turn, because this is very complex, is you want to think about what your goals are. What are your goals for turn 1? Well, we can talk about them, some of them. Got them written down. Okay, so Germany goals turn 1. Well, the most important thing is the Germans want to be able to capture Paris. They don't want the game to go sideways and allow France to, have their money and place another bunch of units on the board. So they want to capture Paris. They want to control the Atlantic. They want to control the Atlantic with their navy. They do not want a scenario where all of a sudden Canada and the UK has free reign to start building a navy, and when that happens, it's not long before units are being dropped off in Western Europe. So you want to prevent that scenario as long as you can. So you want to, control the Atlantic. You also want to have Warsaw. By the end of turn 1, you want to have control of Warsaw. In terms of getting rich, Germany wants to get rich. So you're going to want to go into Norway, and with the mindset that you're going to capture Oslo, which is the capital, but also Narvik. And also to get that NO, you're also going to need to control Denmark and Holland. So it's just a 5 NO swing in NO, but it is important. And also to speed up the game, because you can see basically all these guys are frozen until later on in the game, until Yugoslavia is under German control or Italian control, or the Greece. So you want to get those territories as fast as you can. And just to clarify, when you annex Helsinki, and before you're at war with Russia, that this sea zone, this destroyer, and this plane cannot leave. So just FYI, these are finished units that cannot leave until Germany is at war with Russia. Now, that does not include the proxy war. So basically, all the units that are here are stuck here. The Russian destroyer can leave, but it cannot go past Denmark. Now, the Russian Navy, we're not going to talk too much about Russia, but the Russian Navy that's here can leave, okay? So I think, folks, we're going to talk about purchases for turn 1. Now, this needs to be carefully thought out, because it is imperative that you have units that are going to be able to do something on turn 2. So you've got 52 IPP to spend. We're purchasing a pocket sub and a regular sub. Now the subs are only 5 and these are 4. We're purchasing 5 infantry total, 2 armor, 2 artillery, and 2 SS Panzer Grenadier. So that's a total of $52, not saving $1. There is no more save IPP, and for the fall of Paris, you could get to place a tank and something else in Marseille. That no longer happens, so you don't need to save 5 IPP. And so that is the purchases. Now, I'm going to actually pause here, and I'm going to do a different segment. This is part 1, the overview. Now we're going to get into declaring our battles on the second turn. So I'm going to mark everything out, and then I'm going to come back.